The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Glory to you, O Lord. One of those at table with Jesus said to him, "Blessed is the one who will dine in the kingdom of God." Jesus replied, "A man gave a dinner to which he invited many. When the time for dinner came, he dispatched his servants to say to those invited, 'Come, everything is now ready.' But one by one they all began to excuse themselves. The first said to him, 'I have purchased a field and must go and examine it. I ask you, consider me excused.' Another said, 'I have purchased 5 yoke of oxen, and I am on my way to evaluate them. I ask you, consider me excused.' Another, 'I have just married a woman, therefore I cannot come.' The servant went and reported this to his master. Then the master of the house, in a rage, commanded his servant, 'Go out quickly into the streets and alleys of the town. Bring in here the poor, the crippled, and the blind, and the lame.' The servant reported, 'Sir, your orders have been carried out, and still there is room.' The master then ordered the servant, 'Go out to the highways and hedgerows, and make people come in, that my house may be filled. For I tell you, none of those who were invited will taste my dinner.'" The Gospel of the Lord. For many reasons, we're quite familiar with this reading of Paul to the Corinthians. As I mentioned yesterday, this immediately follows the preceding and introductory verses from Paul to this Christological hymn. Why do we know it so well? Well, one, we hear it several times during the year, and I think it's very right to say it really is our mission statement as Christians. It's beautiful. It's deep. It tells us who God is, it tells us who we are, and it tells us who we are in the eyes of God. It's a good passage to just sit with and just sit with it and let it talk to you. Beautiful as it is, it can be confounding and scary, and we can resist easily. People will often say, I just can't follow Christianity. I just don't believe in the cross and that kind of suffering in a God of love. I have to say again, it's why I preach the way I do. And I don't care about how long it is, although I probably should. Because if we don't know who God is, we're never going to understand who Christ is. God is the essence of love. You could spell that in your sleep, I'm sure. It's a great mystery, isn't it? But it's not so great that we can't understand it. There's nobody here right now that doesn't know what this means, because you've all lived it. You've all had suffering in your life. You've all walked through hard things. We've all had to do hard things we didn't want to do. We've had to humble ourselves. At times we were, what's another word for persecuted? Teased, put down, criticized, because we did the right thing at the right time, because it was the right thing and the right time to do it. We've suffered hard things, and we did the hard things because they were there to be done. Sometimes we probably did them with rich love. Other times we just did them because they were right there. It doesn't have to be pure and perfect. But this really is our mission statement, because it identifies who we are in God because of who God is in us. We reflected that, was it Sunday? That God, in his immeasurable seeing of us with such great value, that God would come to us in one like ourselves, weak and humble, so that God came to show us what it means to be like God. And to see Jesus, to see Christ, is to see God. I don't know if people like it or not, but you got to pick on somebody, you know. Emma. How you doing today? You're a delightful young lady, aren't you? Don't answer that out loud. It would be embarrassing, I'm sure. You have challenges in life. Now again, do you live with pain? No. Do you feel resolved about your circumstance in life? I mean, I know you're young and you're kind of figuring out who you are and you know who your boyfriend's going to be and what kind of dress you're going to wear at your wedding and you know all the things girls think about at 12 or 13 now. Are you 12 or 13? Yes. This is really going well, isn't it? You'd prefer to stand upright and walk, right? Now, again, it's kind of embarrassing. I'm not picking on you. I'm making a point, right? You know what suffering is. Not because you're in pain, but because you live with a wheelchair. And your mother's sacrifice, whose name I can never remember. Nanette? I'll probably call you Lynette for the rest of your life. So maybe that's not nice to say that. I don't put you on the spot because I like it when you guys come. It's great to see you. It's hard for me to imagine, but I suspect you have a very rich future. And I think it's a blessed thing that your mother takes the time and the effort to bring you to Mass. Or is it you that brings her? Because before too long, you're going to be driving. You may be driving her crazy already. But in a few years, you're going to be driving a car. You have the same opportunities to know and love Christ because you're going to go to the same heaven as the rest of us. What loss or suffering or limitation do you or I have? We all have limitations, do we not? God had a weakness for justice. God has the weakness of love. And as I like to say, as often as I've said it, the name of God, to be Almighty God, means that God has unlimited, unmerited, freely given, unconditional self-surrender. Every once in a while, we see that in a human person. People just outside of themselves, just giving for the other. It reminds me of the story, was it, what year was that? 86 maybe. And the earthquake in Kobe, Japan, 30,000 people were killed in less than an hour. And the father's little boy was at school. And so he ran to the school after the shaking stopped, and he kind of remembered where the little boy's homeroom was. So he went to that part of the building which was completely demolished. And brick by brick, he started digging his kid out, not knowing whether he was dead or alive. And the police came and said, "Get out of there. It's not safe. The gas lines are leaking." And they go home. There's nothing you can do. They're dead. "Will you help me now?" he said. And he kept digging, and his hands got raw and bleeding and blistered. And the fire people came, and they tried to run him off too. And they said, "No, will you help me now?" They left. Several hours overnight. I don't remember how many hours. He just kept digging and digging. And finally, this is a true story. There were 6 or 8 or 10 kids under all that rubble because one of the beams of the building had fallen and kind of made it an arch. And they were underneath in this dark, cold place. They were hungry. It was a day or a day and a half that this guy was there digging. And so I don't know who heard who first. And the dad said, son, are you there?" "Yeah, Dad, we're here. And the dad just kept digging. And they were finally rescued. And the boy came out and he said, Dad, and I kept telling the kids, my dad said if I was ever in trouble, he would come and save me. I knew you would come. That's this reading, isn't it? Now, we're not all going to have that experience. I hope you never do. But this is evident enough in the human condition because of Christ, because he showed us how. Today, because of this reading, we're using the votive Mass for the Holy Eucharist. Again, I don't know really how to convey the power and the mystery of this sacrifice, because it is quite literally and immediately in this moment the sacrament of our redemption, that the same love, the same power, I don't know that I can say the same suffering that Jesus endured on the cross is evident and present and given at this table. God is beyond time, so that all time is always before God. So, in that mystical sense, beyond time, for the Father, Jesus is always on that cross. Is he always suffering? No, it was a moment in time, 2,000 years ago, but mystically, in the power of that love, he's always on that cross. And that redeeming grace is always emanating from that cross. And it's made immediate and present to us in this holy sacrifice. That leads us to the image of the gospel. The dinner ultimately is the dinner of this table. All are invited, but not all will accept the invitation. That's another principle of Christian spirituality. God invites, we respond. We don't have to. It's free will. We can say yes, we can say no. Please don't be lukewarm, because you'll get spit out. If we say yes, we try to the best of our ability to follow the model and the example of Christ, but we can only do so in the mind and the heart and the person of Jesus at this table. Ponder this. You probably know the chapter and verse because we read it so often. It's Philippians chapter 2, verses 5 to 11. Maybe you can sit with that today. Don't worry. Well, I just never feel like I'm doing it well enough. You're never gonna. It's hard to live this way. It is. We have to have emotional and psychological boundaries. Jesus did. Don't you think it was hard for Jesus because he couldn't go around and stay awake 24 hours a day, every day, and just heal and touch and heal just as many people as possible? He couldn't do it all. You remember the story, the brother comes up and says, hey, Lord, tell my brother to give me my share of the inheritance. Jesus had that emotional, spiritual, psychological boundary. Who appointed me your judge and arbiter? He didn't take on everybody's problems. Carry your own lunch. But he loved them, and he gave them wisdom and direction. We have to have those boundaries too. No one of us can do it all. But we are called to do what's in front of us, and that's why we have the nourishment of this food. I hope you have a great life, and I believe you're gonna, because of your mother, Nanette. See? Bill, I'll see you next week. You all have a real good day.